Hello there, and welcome to the next episode of Drizzt Done Right, a podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode we'll be diving deep into Chapter 14 of Homeland, titled Proper Respect, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
And my name is Jeffrey. You know, Dungeons & Dragons plays a large part of the fabric of the story, and we like to pick apart a few threads of the tapestry and look how things look at from the chapter will relate to the tabletop game that we love to play, the 5e edition of Dungeons & Dragons.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next chapter, and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. You can share your favorite parts of the chapter via email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
Or, better yet, switch your site to Infravision and become a member of our own Dim Light Squad. You guys know we have our Drizzt Done Right Discord. The link, where is it? Up at the episode description, towards the end, inside there. Find the invite. Come into the Dim Light Squad. Join the conversation. It goes a little bit further beyond the chapters in the page of the book. Our Dim Light Squad member Jaws was actually sharing pictures in the fan art show and tell section of some of the amazing scenes from what I believe is the illustrated book, right?
Yeah, it's like
they didn't do a comic, right? It's an illustrated book.
Okay. Oh, is that what it is?
I'm not exactly sure. I know because he shared they've been sharing the pictures of the illustrated book that just came out. Okay. But I think these are like like a graphic novel or an animated comic that they did of the scenes. So he had just shared chapter 13, and the detail in the drawings are beautiful. I've shared a few of them on our Facebook if you've caught them when they come up.
I have. I've seen them. Well, I was actually just at a comic book store yesterday, and I was like, it's got to be here somewhere. I'm looking all over, and they actually had the entire was the Crystal Shard, the whole Icewind Dale trilogy on the shelf.
Were you at a local comic book store?
I was over at
Give me a shout out. Go ahead.
Complete Inbox in Ephrata, Pennsylvania.
Excellent.
It's
that
actually,
way the next time you go in there, you can let them know that you name dropped.
Well, it's actually I guess it's like a retro video game store, but it's connected. Yeah. They also do comics in there as well, so it's a really cool store. But unfortunately, I did not see the illustrated book or the whatever it's called, but I need to look into it and find it because like you said, the illustrations in that, amazing.
I was even actually having a small discussion with Sevik about hook horrors that show up inside of this chapter, and shared a couple of pictures as well in that show and tell, the fan art section. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Discord, click the invitation in the episode description. There's a link. Go ahead in there. We have a fan art show and tell, and there's a bunch of different pictures. Recently, I just shared 3 or 4 of the different imaginings of how these hook horrors come across, and I got to tell you, bro, I did not see how these things were represented because in my head, totally different.
Yeah.
So to see them was kind of a little bit like grotesque, like wow.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think anywhere in the book it really talks about that they're birds. They're bird type creatures, I should say.
Bird-like, yeah. Yeah,
and it's just like, I don't know. You don't think of them that way, but then you look at them in the monster manual. It's like,
right? And they almost look like demented. What are those things from the Crystal Shard? Oh goodness, the giant vultures, Skeksis, I think they're called.
Oh man, it's been a while since I read that one.
Anywho,
we'll get there eventually.
They're terrifying. And so Sevik was actually given a little insight on. He had once actually ran a D&D campaign where the adventurers came across a group of hook horrors, and he's like, talked about the challenges a little bit that they faced, and I thought it was really great. So for you, those of you who really want to take the next leap through the content part of what we're doing with y'all, get into that Discord. Yeah. Join the Dim Light Squad. Come be part of our family. Give us some discussion. We'll give you shout outs.
One of us.
So what's been going on with you, buddy?
Oh, I was going to say pretty normal week, but no. I got strep throat for the first time. That's no fun. My tonsils were the size of like softballs, and yeah, so no, I exaggerate. Last time that happened was when I had mono back like over 15 years ago, and yeah, it's no fun.
Thankfully, you sound pretty good.
So, man,
you don't sound like you've been suffering.
Once you put me on some antibiotics and some steroids, I was better in almost 2 days, and
Right? That's how all those professional athletes fail the drug test, is because it's like people think that, oh, you use steroids for big muscle gains, right? Technically, no, you use it to recover faster.
Right, exactly. Reduce that swelling, because I could not eat my lunch on Tuesday. I'm just like, I can't swallow. What is going on?
Oh, that is terrifying.
Yeah,
That's horrible.
No, but it gave me a chance to relax and play some video games that I've been wanting to play for a while. And yeah, that was my week. How about yours?
Yeah. Not a whole lot. Not too crazy. Was hanging out at the farm a couple of days this week. So delivering in the rain, that was always fun. Getting people their vegetables and produce. People that can't get out to get it themselves.
Nice.
And been playing a little bit of that. I was telling you before we came on the show with the Diablo 4 beta.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are in the Discord, for those of you who listen, I have a PS4 profile. Come on in. We'll link up. I was playing Diablo 4. Going to be playing it a bit this weekend to level up the characters. Try to get a little bit of free swag before it comes out in June.
Yep.
And when it does come out, I'll be spending a good bit of time on that one. So I got my video game list lined up. We got Harry Potter coming out in April.
That's coming out soon. Yep.
PS4s. I think you're at Xbox, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I got PS4s coming out for. And then doing the Diablo. Oh boy, and then everything else slipped right out of my head. I had something coming out in the fall as well that looked pretty cool. Not a Modern Warfare. I kind of gave up on first-person shooters for the most part. They're very toxic and frustrating, and
they can be. Yeah. Well, actually,
it's just a lot of hate. Like when they did the proximity chat, and it sounds great. It's a great idea, right? You can hear the people near you, and they can hear you.
Yep.
Except what they want you to hear is filth. And people, I like to joke. I like to break stones. I like to be a guy who's a little bit gregarious from time to time. My big word hanging on the wall. But that is not the chat that you get when people are playing something. It's just hating on one another to a degree where I could do without it. And trying to find other kind of games where I can interact with people and have a good time. And that's where I talk about it with people in the Discord. Right. Come on out, guys. I'll give you my name. We'll hook up. We'll play we'll play some games together. Take it a little bit to the next level.
Well, that's the best part of playing multiplayer games, is playing with your buds, playing with your friends, playing with people that you know. No, for me, I silence everyone when I play online. I'm just like, I don't want to hear anybody, unless I'm playing with a friend or something. Then we're just in a private chat. But no, I did hear. I don't know if this is an actual release date, but I heard that the Oculus is coming out with the third Oculus, the Meta Oculus, 3. And I'm just like, I've never had a VR before, but
I'm just waiting for the eye implants. Once they get past that step, they get the eye implants going in. Elon, believe the next generation of the Mind Link. Get that kicking, buddy.
The PSVR 2 sounds really cool, but I don't have a PS5, so sounds expensive.
You should asterisk those things, right? Yeah.
I put it on my wish list, so we'll see.
Excellent. That's where I'm at now. Right before we get the show here started, I'm also at the same part where I'm kicking it around. Like, it's a big investment to make into a console.
Oh yeah.
But when it comes to gaming, it's almost a necessary evil, because if you have a computer, I do not. You have a desktop, I do not. It is darn near impossible to match your desktop to somebody else's and still play a competitive game, because the ping rate varies, the processor speeds vary, and you get into a game with people, and simply having a very nice computer will give you a tactile advantage. That sucks when you don't.
Yeah.
I always think about it when I first started playing first-person shooters, like the old Halo. My lag would kill me every time. I never even bother to get good because somebody else is just running around, pew, 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 and I'm done. I'm over, and I lag as I go to climb a ladder, and then wait, how'd I die? I hate this. So with that said, Justin, why don't we dim the lights a little bit, and why don't you give us the Drizzt, buddy?
The Drizzt, it's the part of the show where we take a look at this week's chapter and give you the Drizzt of it. So, Jeffrey, this chapter, what a crazy chapter. There were multiple moments in this chapter, and I posted my reaction on the Discord because I was just like,
loved it,
like, what is going on? Like, there were multiple times where I was physically reacting, whether I was gasping, wincing, or even like releasing an audible, oh no,
out loud.
So exactly. Like, I am really excited to dive into this chapter. It was really cool. So
Yeah. I mean, this book's hitting that part where, like, if you were in the Never-Ending Story, Sebastian would be lost in the
oh
book, and you know what I mean. It starts to become real to him. Like
right.
this, yeah, it sinks you in so hard here. I
Yep.
agree. There's a
Yeah.
lot that took place emotionally and societally, I guess you'd say. So, like,
Yeah.
Drizzt seeing the structure of what's
Yeah.
going on even a little clearer.
And like, I mean, he's over 20 years old now. Over 20 years old now, so it's like, come on, boy, figure this out.
Yeah.
Figure out your society here. But
He's
all right.
almost at that point where you're like, "Hey, buddy, you were promising, but could you pick it up, please?"
All right, so chapter 14 takes place within Drizzt's 9th year at Melee Magthir. Whew! How much? 9 years go by in a chapter. Awesome. So by this point, the students are now going on regular practice patrols, they're calling them, in the caves and corridors outside of Menzer Baranzan. So when this chapter starts, we're following Drizzt and his group of 10 students along with Master Hatchnet. We learn that Drizzt is the top of his class, making him the leader of this group, and there is a second group led by Bergenjan Baenre, who is the second student in the class. Bergenjan
No longer number 10. Now
Right.
he's up to number 2. It's been a while, but cream rises.
So Bergenjan and his group are in a different tunnel, but not that far away. So over the past for over 3 months, these students have been going on these regular patrols, most of which have been uneventful. There was that one time when a cave fissure was encountered, but it made a quick escape before the Drow had a chance to dispatch it. This day was going to be different, though. Drizzt sensed the presence of a creature nearby. By the time he realized it was a Drow from the other party, Drizzt already had his scimitars crossed at the Drow's throat. Like, whew, this guy was on edge. He was ready for something a lot worse than that. The Drow informed Drizzt's group that there was a missing child, a princess from House Baenre, and there were monsters nearby. So it's like, danger, right?
Yeah.
Hatchnet quickly inquired, what kind of monsters? To which all of their ears were met with the sound of loud clacking. Hookars. What is that from Harry Potter the movie? I
thought you were doing the Addams Family click. I was like, I didn't hear it.
Sorry.
That's why I was doing my thumbs like, dun, dun. No, you're absolutely right. And to me, honestly, when you say that, that is one of the iconic terrifying sounds. Like if there was a soundtrack to like the horrifying sounds of the Underdark, it would be that clack.
The
you know what I mean? Like, that's what I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like if matron mothers weren't so matron motherly, I imagine them tucking in their little drows at night and telling them, if you're not careful, the hookars will come for you in your sleep.
And then the older brothers, like in the top bunk, just like making clack noises.
Yes.
So, knowing that hookars rely mainly on sound, the group quickly switched to silent hand gestures. I just love that they can do that. They made their way down the corridor with Hatchnet informing his students all along the way to not use darkness spells because, these creatures don't rely on sight, and to make sure that they aim for the soft, squishy parts between the hookars' thick armor. Eventually, they heard a scream of a child, and Drizzt ignores all orders from Hatchnet and starts running full speed toward the sound. He's determined to rescue this princess of House Baenre. Drizzt made it to this cul-de-sac first, scouting out and finding 5 hookars, which, like we said earlier, they're these bird-like creatures and or bird-type monstrosities, I should say.
Yep.
With these like hooked arms, basically.
The body of a like insectile like body with chitinous armor. We'll get into it because that is definitely where I'm going. But yeah, it's like a chitinous armor. I love that term.
Yeah. So he tried to find a quick read. He tried to get a quick read on the situation before the rest of the group caught up, but Drizzt had to warn them before they stumbled into the room right in front of the 2 giant sentries. He had to audibly shout out, "Sentries!" And then just all hell broke loose. Drizzt's only concern was for this child, so he made straight for the 3 hookars in the cul-de-sac, getting an advantage on one, but wasn't able to dispatch it before he feared that the other 2 that were right behind him were going to, start attacking him.
Right.
So
Put him at a disadvantage.
Right. So he was so close to quickly spinning around and getting into a defensive position, but then the child screamed again, and that just kept Drizzt on the offense. So in his rage, Drizzt did manage to find a split in the monster's cranial armor, where he plunged his scimitar straight down into the creature's brain.
Say that again. That is a beautiful vocal term. He found a split in its what?
Its cranial armor.
That's fantastic. I love
that. So one of the other Hookars managed to land a heavy blow on Drizzt, producing a deep wound. And the other Hookar, it went straight for the child, picked her up, and, quote, put an end to the child's screams.
When you say, quote, have you ever seen birds try to eat something?
Well, and that's something I wanted to bring up with you. I was thinking I would talk about it when you get into Hookars later.
Let's hold it there then. Go ahead.
Because the way I imagined it is probably different than how it actually would happen with an actual Hookar. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So the battle raged on and was not looking great for the group when suddenly the second patrol arrived, led by Bergenyan and Dinan, to save the day. Together, the two patrols destroyed the remaining Hookars in, I think it says like seconds. Like they just overrun them very quickly. The groups determined that the princess was not of House Bandray, and actually was not even a princess, but was a male.
Is there princess in another castle, Mario?
So a male child of a lesser house. Drizzt had a real issue with this. I had a real issue with this. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why the false information? Why was everyone okay with this? Like, I'll get into it later.
When I first read this, I remember this part because again, Hookar's great scene.
Yeah.
Way back when I first read this, I realized that like going into this, I never saw it coming.
No.
At all. So like when he's upset about misinformation, I'm like, well, how would they have known like whether it was a girl or a boy? Like they just know there's a child missing.
Right.
There's something in the caves. And like I'm automatically like making excuses for their lack of information, not realizing that the reason Drizzt was so upset is because it is a setup. Right. Essentially.
Well, I mean that makes it so obvious that it's a setup because it's like, hey, there's a princess over there of House Bandray, which is like first house of Benzobaranzan, super important to make sure we protect her. Let's go. And then it's like, oh, this was not.
Yeah, no. Like I took it as like whisper down the lane. Must have been information that went from one guy to one guy to one guy to one guy to one guy, and suddenly it turned in from, hey, there's a child missing to like, oh, by the way, it's the princess. I didn't realize at first, walking into it. This is a great advocacy for rereading books and going through stories. The small details you miss because now the foreshadowing that leads into it, like you really do get a better feel of the duplicitous nature of the Drow.
Yeah. So Drizzt picked up on the fact that it was like something's going on here, and Drizzt made an accusation toward Dinan on their way back. It's just, you knew what was around the bend in the tunnel. And Dinan just shot it down and with a slap of his blade on Drizzt's wound, saying, keep your foolish words unspoken. And it's like, whoa, like...
That is a very older brother thing to do, where you just like slap on the back, like, stop. It's
like, I'm going to tell mom what you did, like after you, like, I don't know, like threw your younger brother down in the dirt and he's all scraped up and you just like whap him on the wound. Like, no, you won't.
Yep.
So, knowing Drizzt, those words were not going to go unspoken, right? Like those were coming out. So later in Dinan's room, Drizzt announced the child was a plant. And Dinan wasn't trying to hide anything at this point. The child was, he lets him know the child was sacrificed for the purpose of this drill. And
it's only a common male child. So again, showing you that hierarchy of value in the Drow society. It's like, it's just a common male child. No worries.
Yeah. So the child was sacrificed for the purpose of the drill. This conversation started an aggressive, after Dinan revealed that, this started an aggressive back and forth that ended with Dinan's hands on his weapons. I mean, it looked like Dinan was about to start something here. But Deenan slowly thought about his next move, knowing that he probably would not be able to take Drizzt out.
Put a pin in that moment mentally. We're gonna when we go to the dim light, I really kind of dive into that moment itself.
That's an awesome moment. Very cool.
Yeah.
Luckily, Vierna came in and broke the scene up. And it's just like, okay, good. Vierna's here. Everything's gonna calm down and be good.
You're the first person who was ever happy that a female drow showed up to an altercation. No one in Menzo Berenzin has ever felt that way.
And now, what happens? No, Vierna came in to inform the two that there are rumors of vengeance on House Do'Urden. They filled Drizzt in on House Devere, to which Drizzt was utterly shocked, especially when he heard that Zaknafein helped with the killing of the Devere clerics.
But he already knows about House Devere because Zaknafein had kind of given him details. Now he's kind of getting like that real world account from the other side with none of the blinders put in place. Yeah.
So they also informed Drizzt that he is alive thanks to Deenan killing their older brother Nalfane.
Right. That's strike the gong, boom, and let it resonate. That's crazy.
My gosh. It's just insane. Like
we know that, but for Drizzt in that moment.
Finally, like, what? Like,
yeah.
Crazy. So Drizzt came into Deenan's room having an issue with this first house princess being a lesser house male, only to learn that now his house destroyed House Devere and Deenan killed Nalfane, an event that had to happen or else Drizzt would have been sacrificed. Like, what is going on in Drizzt's head right now?
I mean, gotta at least be some small survivor guilt too. You know what I mean? Like, what? It's like from every angle being assaulted mentally.
Right. So just an insane amount of things that Drizzt is taking on right now.
This poor dude has had a rough 14 chapters of this book.
So, Drizzt retorts to Deenan and Vierna, saying that Drow make the world so difficult to inhabit. He wanted to go deeper with it. He wanted to curse the Spider Queen, but he was wise enough to hold his tongue. The chapter ended with a lesson from Deenan to Drizzt. Drow warriors do whatever they must to survive, and when a deed is done cleanly, it never happened.
That's a very nice focus on the word there. Like you're right. When it happens cleanly, never happened.
Yeah.
Like that's. I love how like a lot of times, again, like part of the show now that we go through the Drizzt, we focus on the chapters and wording. I realize like Salvatore as a writer does a beautiful job of ending and starting chapters.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean, he leaves you a lot of times with like quotes, literally quotable parts at the end of the chapter. I know I've done it a few times. And like the last line of the chapter, I want to include a lot of times because it's like, man, this guy does a great job of sewing up the story. You know what I mean? Just stitching the end of that line to the beginning of this one. And love it. Love it. What do you think? Think we should take him into the dim light reel?
Let's head on in.
So the dim light reel, for those of you who are new and just happen to show up in chapter 14 with us, and for those of you who have been a while, is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts of the chapter and we dim light all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. For me, I told you to put a pin in it earlier so we could remember it. My dim light's going to be the elder boy versus second boy dynamic in that chapter. So if I chose to shine just a little bit of darkness onto the growing animosity between the elder boy of the house, Deenan Do'Urden, and its second boy, Drizzt Do'Urden. Every Drow house is naturally going to find scheming and infighting as they jostle for a superior position. But when it comes to Drizzt and Deenan, the only animosity, it only seems to flow one way, which is just completely odd when it comes to Drow culture, right? I mean, everywhere else you look, they're scheming and plotting, and Kel nods right away with scheming and plotting. Right. We see it. But again, Drizzt never even looks that way. It's like crossing the road and only ever looking left.
It's not on his radar at all. He's not built that way. I mean, I love that you're going into this because it very much builds on last episode where it's like Deanon was thinking
That
like
little line on top of the
of what
parapet or
the catwalk up there where he's just like firstborn or what elder boy should be
Yep, that's
aware of.
exactly.
Yep.
It's funny because that line is exactly what made me really want to focus in on this part, because I thought it did such a great job of further explaining the paranoia that's built into the Drow indoctrination.
Yep.
So my dim light's going to actually take place right after the culmination of the Hook horror fight. Master Hatchnet had just addressed. Wow, there's a lot of similar sounding words there. Master Hatchnet had just addressed Drizzt, who is doing a little sulking and a little seething at how things went down. And Deanon appears behind him and slaps him on the back real quick, right on the wound that he received fighting from the Hook horrors. Way to go, jerk. Deanon, though, he sees the fire in Drizzt's eyes, and he warns him to keep those words unspoken, or Deanon will cut out his tongue. They argue about the purpose of the drill that just happened, and Deanon strikes Drizzt. Like, just slaps him. At first, I thought he was verbally slapped, but then I realized, like, Deanon just smacked him.
Yep. I assume with the broadside of his sword, you know, like.
No. In the conversation, it says he was struck across the face by the realization or whatever. So it's like Deanon hit him, I believe, during this conversation. Like, not like punched him, but just kind of like slapped him, like, hey, psh, right here, pay attention. I am your elder boy.
Right.
And Drizzt refuses to be cowed. This is built into his nature. There is no way he's going to suddenly be subservient, right? Mm-hmm. So when Deanon reaches back for a second blow to hit him, Drizzt catches it in mid swing and challenges him further, to which Deanon responds with, learn your place, second boy, in the academy and in the family. Then it's like Drizzt turns around and he curses the academy, and he stops just short. For those of you who are watching on the video YouTube, you can see just how short I think they fell. For those of you who are not watching the video YouTube, it's very short. There's just not there. He stops right in front of it and decides not to curse the family as well. And that causes Deanon, though, to brandish his sword and his dirk. Drizzt jumps back suddenly, pulls his scimitars out, and he says, I have no desire to fight you, my brother. Know well that if you attack, I will defend, and only one of us will walk out of here.
Oh, I loved that.
Yeah, and it's like he doesn't even scream it or anything. It's just like it's like, to me, it's triggering a trap, right? It's no emotion. Right. This is just a response to that action.
Yep.
And this gives Deanon pause. He'd seen Drizzt fight. In fact, he'd literally just watched him single-handedly dispatch 2 Hook horrors with the help of a third, which is something he believed that Zaknafein might not even have been able to pull off. Deanon realized that he really didn't like his chances in a battle, but he could not give ground. Drizzt may gain confidence in himself and in future struggles between him and Deanon. And if he backed down and gave ground now, he would never be able to get that superior perch back.
Right.
And I find this part really interesting because Deanon is caught, essentially, he's bluffing a little bit, right? They're playing cards, and you're like, no, I have a great hand. He's trying to bluff it. Yeah. He came up behind Drizzt, and he lobs this casual threat at him. And he's so used to being obeyed that he never even considered the ramifications of trying to intimidate Drizzt.
And failing.
He tried to use, poorly, because it's like, I'm going to throw this at you, and it just strikes him and drops to the ground, and then Drizzt is like, what was that?
Yeah.
You know, like hardly a gnat even, sir. He tried to use his authority and station from the academy and the family to lean a little bit on Drizzt and force him to heal. But Drizzt is steadfast in his resolve. He's peeked behind the curtain, and he does not like what he sees at all. He's made up his mind that he will hold his ground no matter what the cause, and Deanon catches a whiff of that, and it scares him. Deanon would have no problem killing Drizzt, at least, not morally. He's not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over it. He's not going to, the family probably wouldn't even care that much, depending on, how he spins it. But Drizzt was right here in front of him, and that means that Deanon knows he's at a disadvantage. At that moment where Deanon is debating all of these choices and he's sitting on that razor's edge, that precipice of like falling into the abyss or tipping over into violence, which way is he going to go? Vierna shows up and he's saved by the bell. She walks in all calm and cool and diffuses the moment, telling them that their family can't afford infighting at this moment because they may be on the brink of war. Drizzt doesn't have time for games. He tries to walk off. He's like, I'm out. He's going to leave, and then Deanon scolds him again and tells him to remember his place in the academy and the family. And Vierna drops like this little bit of a grenade in there casually by saying, as you remembered your place with Nalfine. Denon charges right on through the conversation without even blinking. And he's like, the battle against House DeVere was already won. The act brought no peril to the family. Meh. And Drizzt is hit with a bit of a revolution as Denon adds, it's a difficult world we inhabit. Like, Drizzt is suddenly faced with so many revelations about his family. Vierna tells him to show respect to Denon because he owes him his life. She explains the third son of a noble family is normally sacrificed to Lolth, but since Nalfane had died, Drizzt was no longer third son. Drizzt knew that Nalfane had died at the hands of a Drow, for Zaknafane had told him so. But he was just now finding out that Denon was that Drow.
Yeah, crazy.
I love how this ends. Denon sternly declares, we are Drow warriors. We do what we must to survive. And Drizzt is emotionally gutted at this point. And he's just kind of like throwing it out there, no longer even able to muster any outrage in his tone. He says, as you did on the night of my birth, and you were cunning enough to get away cleanly with the deed. And the response from Denon stings him even more profoundly. He ends the chapter saying, it never happened.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you think he meant? I know you tied it up right at the end of the chapter, but just kind of wanted to go through that and then throw it back at you. Like, what do you think he meant?
Yeah, and I think, just like I said before, it's just if you do something cleanly enough, then it never happened. And so, yeah, like if you take out, if your house is able to manage to take out an entire other house, no survivors, it never happened.
I think of it kind of like suturing a wound, right? Like if you're really sloppy at putting your stitches together and making smaller incisions like that, you're going to be left with this ghastly track mark scar, right? Gnarly built up tissue. But if you were a plastic surgeon with the deftest of skill and you're able to weave in there and just, tie every end just beautifully together, chances are you might not even notice that scar. And it's like, that's kind of the visual.
Right.
Yeah. It's like visually, that's what struck me when he said that. Cause it's like, he's pomp and he's holding on to this whole like puffed up version of himself. But in that moment, he is a deadly assassin, killer Drow. Like his emotion suddenly switches. Like you can see, I picture this like switch clicking in Denon and just turns and goes, never happened.
Right.
That's chilling to me. Like, right. This guy is a killer. Like because you get used to seeing it technically, I think for me through the eyes of Drizzt. And it's like Denon is it's older brother, nice guy, not nice guy, but nice guy. And oh, no, remember, though, he's still a master at the academy. He is still the guy who killed Nalfane. He is still a challenge not to be taken lightly, even though in his own mind, we get to see that paranoia of Denon as it grows, where he thinks that he would stand zero chance against Drizzt. None.
Right.
It's like, you'd have to think that he'd at least do as good as Bergenyon, maybe, right? Like, he'd be able to put up a fight because he's further ahead and he's known how to do it. But it's like in Denon's mind, it's like he's a paper tiger, all bark, no bite.
Yep.
And it's like, it's just really kind of neat to see that inferiority, complex inferiority feeling inside of Denon in a world where he is very respected because he's the ninth house elder boy and not without skill or merit at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. So with that said, buddy, why don't you take us into your dim light?
Cool. My dim light, it has to be the whole scene with the missing child. Just, yeah. Initially,
I love that you did this because, again, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
When I first read this, I misread the book completely in this. And I do that with like artsy films sometimes because I'm like, I just miss what they're trying to do. And I just, to me, I take it and run with it. And so I'm really happy that you're taking a moment to spotlight the child issue.
Yeah, for me, it's been a while since I read this book. So any like not major events like this, I totally buy into. I'm like I don't see where he's going right away, and it's like reading the book
I love that.
for the first time, because it's been probably close to 10 years since I've read it, so it's nice.
No, you say that, and it does bring up a point to me. Like we have people in our Discord who have read this 30 times, 40 times, at least more than 5, right? And just so part of the thing I love about doing this podcast with you and for the people is I like to approach it in the way you just mentioned, where it's like, you know what, even though I've read Homeland myself like 3 or 4 times, maybe 4 or 5, and I've read it a few times.
Yeah.
I like to approach everything we're looking at as if I haven't, and I try to like dissect it like a frog in science class. You know, like, what am I seeing over here? What does that mean? And I know where it's going to go, but I want to look at it at that moment right there as if I'll never see tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So, this missing child. Initially, Drizzt's patrol group is told that the missing child is a princess, as we talked about, from House Banray, that is. My first reaction was, how?
Right.
Like, how does that happen? Drizzt didn't leave his house until he was at least 20 years old. How did a child of the first house of Menzer Berenzon wander out of, like, not only out of the house, but out of their compound, outside of the city? How did a child, a princess of the first house, manage to get out there? And I'm just like, what? But I'm like, okay, like, my gullible mind immediately started thinking just like Drizzt, which is, gotta save her at all costs. It's a princess of the first house of Menzer Berenzon. She needs to be saved. And so I just kind of ignored those thoughts, and maybe I should have been listening to them a little bit more.
No, I'm glad you said that, because honestly, again, like, I didn't even consider that. Like, I figured like somebody had come in and stolen the child. I never even considered that. Essentially, like, wait a minute, you're telling me that this princess from House Banray, who is small and tiny, just decided to walk past the toddler gate on the second floor of House Banray, right out the front
she
door?
Just hovered right out. You know, she got
baby's day out.
She got her she got her house emblem a little early. Or got a hold of her mom's house emblem.
Yeah, and we just spent this whole book reading about, right, like you said, Drizzt, 20 years till he gets to leave the house. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, I did think at the very beginning, just like, what's going on here? But then I was like, no, we got to save her. And Drizzt hears the screams of the child, and he runs off by himself. Despite knowing that Hookars caught the child, he goes off by himself. Which, to me, that makes sense. I mean, yes, Hookars, terrifyingly huge and strong, and like you said, you're going to get into it later, so I won't talk about him too much. But
a whole lot of
save the princess. That is the goal here. Go, run, Drizzt, do what you got to do. And Drizzt eventually comes face to face with 5 of them. He eventually gets slashed by one of them. This knocks him back just long enough for another Hookar to, again, put an end to the child's screams. This surprised me, Jeffrey. This surprised me to the point where I instinctively rose up my hand and covered my gaping mouth. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what? Like,
right.
He lost. He didn't do it. The princess died. Like, oh my gosh. And I was so invested in this moment, and it was just so surprising to me. I was just like, wait, like, this was just, again, it's been probably close to a decade since I read this book, so I was just like, I didn't remember this moment at all. I was just like, whoa. After reading a little further, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I do remember this. But I mean, I was really surprised here.
Yeah, I shared your shock as well. I mean, to me, I had to take a moment, because when you had went through the Drizzt, I didn't realize how he knew the sentries were there. And so to just lay out the battle, essentially, he runs right into this cavern without any regard to anything, just bolts in, and runs past the 2 sentries.
He somehow, I didn't write it down, but somehow he does climb up somewhere to get advantage on the situation. Where he sees the sentries and then the 3 in the back with the child.
Okay. I thought he just ran right past the 2. That's why he knew that the people behind him were going to face them, and then bolted at the 3 near the child. But it would make more sense if he was coming in, because they were using the hand language. You know what I mean? That's where I had a little bit of a muddled view of that conversation. But what you say makes sense.
I mean, it might not be exactly how it was. I know there was a moment where Drizzt heard the group coming into the room, and it's like, hey, if I can hear the group coming, those Hookars, they know that the group is coming. Right. So that was his motivation for yelling out, like, stop, you know?
Danger, Drow Rangers.
So, but exactly how he got to that point, I don't quite remember. But anyway, So
If anybody who's listening has a mental layout of how this whole fight plan plays out, come into the Discord, drop it off in our general discussion, and kind of give us a verbal map if you want.
yeah, perfect. So when I read this part of the princess being killed, I imagined the hookars picking up the child and snapping her neck.
Right.
That's how I envisioned it. But now that I know a little bit more about them, they don't really have hands. So
Nope.
we'll talk more about that later.
Then they have beaks.
They have beaks. Anyway, so after the fight, they look at the corpse of the princess, and it turns out she's not a princess. It's a boy, and not only just a boy, it's a boy from a lesser house, not even House Banray.
Sounds like a song, right? It's a boy from a lesser house.
So why the incorrect information? So as soon as the group determines that the child was a boy from a lesser house, the mentality of this encounter quickly shifts from, oh man, we lost, to what a fine fight. Like, what the heck, Jeffrey?
Well, because all they lost was a common male child.
Right? Oh man. So, and that's not even the last of it. Drizzt is smart enough to figure out that the boy was planted there. And Dinan doesn't even try to hide it eventually, like when they're in the same room together. And it's just crazy to me that this boy was a Drow child, not a goblin illusioned to look like a boy.
R.I.P. Yuck yuck.
Poor Yuck Yuck. But he was an actual young male child. What is this boy's story? Was he kidnapped from his house? Or was he donated? Like,
it ends with him being gobbled.
Was he the third child and he needed to be sacrificed? Because, I mean, he would have been a little too old, like usually they're sacrificed at birth, right? At least Drizzt was about to be.
Well, yeah, but they were using birth magic as well, so that might have been tied to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, maybe.
But I agree. There's just so many unknowns about how that common male child ended up in this practice scenario.
Right. Oh man.
Because it's clearly, now that we dissect the scene, completely coordinated, put together on purpose.
Right. And I don't know, this whole scene was just so messed up to me.
Yeah. And it's really neat too, if you think about it. Sorry, before from the indoctrination standpoint, like these people at this point in time have now getting towards the end of their academy training. They all respond in the proper way. Like, oh, it's a male child. Yeah, you guys, we killed 5 hookars.
Oh man, that's true.
Mark it on the wall. Woo. You know what I mean? And they don't even care. But there's Drizzt, who has never taken this indoctrination.
9 years in, and he still has not adopted that.
Nope, and he's getting even more rebellious. This is everything Zach Nafane was worried about, was that Drizzt would go there, lose his resistance to this Drow culture, become just like one of those cheering Drow who find out that they killed a male Drow. Who gives a crap? Right. Hey, we killed some hookars. We're all alive. Let's go toast. And it's really chilling, right? Because Drizzt has this, again, disassociation with the group and family around him. He's now finding out that Dinan is a monster, just like all of these monsters, and everybody's a monster, even the monsters. But the monsters are somehow less of a monster.
They're less monster. They're less of monsters than the Drow.
And it's just kind of like shaking him to his core. You know what I mean? But I love that struggle with it, because again, you do see in everybody else in the academy, everybody else in the patrol, everyone else Drizzt is surrounded with buys in.
Yeah.
Hatchnet is law. Everything his lore says is right. And hey, this is how we live. We are Drow. Now, we find out in the future, not every Drow may think like that. But at this moment, Drizzt is surrounded by watching everybody he knows and could love be brainwashed.
Right.
Totally bought in to not adhering to any of the values he holds so important.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, so this whole scene was just so messed up to me. Which, I mean, really is meant to be a huge compliment to Salvatore, because he's obviously, it's not saying like this man is messed up for writing this stuff. Like, it's a huge compliment because he's obviously showing exactly how brutal Drow culture it's how they're supposed to be.
Yes.
That's how they were originally thought up. So it's amazing that he's able to come up with situations to continuously show us just how brutal Drow culture is. This is just me being extremely stupid because I know how brutal Drow culture is, but I keep getting surprised by it.
Well, and it's amazing, right? Because it's so easy to look at somebody and go, they're just misunderstood.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people do who,
could be,
with a cursory knowledge of Drizzt, think of Drow. And they're like, oh, the big bad Drow. Ooh, the boogeyman. Oh, they live in the Underdark, and they are just evil and assassins, and they scheme. But they do. And every rumor you've heard is not even close to as bad as they actually are. And Salvatore keeps showing you that time and time and time again. But he does it so wonderfully by taking these emotional moments and just attaching another thread to it and pulling it a little closer. And again, it just weaves this tapestry verbally of emotion. And you're just so sunk in. Like you said, you gasp. I mean, how many books make you have like a visceral reaction? And you know what I mean? Especially as you get older, you're like, I've heard that. I've done that. I've seen that.
Right.
But Salvatore just, like a master fisherman is just jigging the bait and waiting for you to strike. And then be like, got another one.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Got a whole bucket full of Jeffrey and Justins already. And he's like, let me show you how you catch another Jeffrey and Justin. And there I am just gobbling it up. Like, this is great.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, so now that we've walked through the dim light, why don't you guys put on your adventure packs, get your little miner hat, turn the light on. Probably not going to need the light because you got infravision. Let's go into the dungeon delve. The dungeon delve is the part of the show where we're going to take this chapter, find a small part, link it with a tabletop role-playing game, and for you guys to have no surprise, I went with the hook horrors.
What?
Yep. To me, one of the most fun things about delving into a dungeon is definitely the creatures that you encounter.
Absolutely.
And, Justin, I know I was talking to you about this earlier. I want to set up a bestiary link in our Discord. It was brought up, and I'm doing a horrible job of remembering who brought this up. So I apologize to our Dim Light squad. Somebody had mentioned that we should have a bestiary. I don't know if it was Sevik or somebody like Trevor or Scott or somebody said that we should have a bestiary link and focus on the creatures inside of the chapters that we go through. And, we do that a little bit here as we go through with the dungeon delve, but I kind of want to also just so people can have visuals, especially the hook horrors and stuff.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea.
For me, I wanted to do a little creature feature and spotlight the hook horror. They are also known as vulturebeak, hacker, or cave dweller. And they are large bipedal subterranean monstrosities that look a little bit like a vulture-like humanoid with bony hooks in place of their hands. It's an invertebrate arthropod. So this is where I wanted to stop.
Interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a bird eat?
I mean, yes. I grew up on a farm, so we had chickens, and they're ruthless little raptors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so when you said that they dispatched of the small child, I don't picture them just picking up they're taking one big claw and snipping the baby drow.
No,
I imagine them trying to eat it, which means that they would like just viciously peck at it, pick it up, and like, neck wobble, trying to gobble it down, like
or just like pecking down and just like ripping his head off, like. But totally like a bird catches a worm, they just like grab it and give it a shake, and like you just see that little child like, oh man, now that's worse, Jeffrey.
Yeah, just so vicious, because that's what was going through my head when you were talking about that. I was like, wait a minute, like I did not consider this, but I've seen a swan try to eat something, and it's like, and it's just so vicious, bro.
They just like do that like head bob upward, like
Yep.
and just like swallow them all. But
For those of you who are listening, by all means, come check out this YouTube so you can see me and Justin try to gobble like a bird.
But of course, they had a corpse to look at afterwards, so we know that he at least didn't get swallowed whole.
No, not fully, but I imagine that this is like one of those Evil Dead scenes where it's quite gory,
Right.
You know.
So one other thing that you said here is it's an invertebrate arthropod. Very interesting, considering...
See, that means something to you because you're the sciencey guy. To me, I was like, that's a good word.
Well, invertebrate or arthropods, they're invertebrates. They do not have a spine. They don't have a vertebrae, right?
Right.
Birds very much have a vertebrae. So evolutionary.
Well, because they fly, right? They would need a
Well,
body and spine,
right? They're
the
yeah.
mechanics to work.
So it's just interesting that they look so much like bird creatures, but yet they are invertebrates. So again,
no, it's neat too because it's only I believe the neck and head as well as the feet that look like a bird.
True.
The other parts are like a chimera or a chimera,
right? Yeah.
Of other creatures, essentially the hooks, the body, and it's terrifying. So then diving and a little touch into that one. That's just the basic description of the lore from the D&D side. When I first read the book, I had pictured these things more crab-like in appearance instead of bird-like.
It makes sense. Yeah.
And when I saw the renderings of them, it really made me appreciate going back to do the deep dive because, like I said earlier, you don't realize how wrong your memories can be. You swear something happened in a certain way, and then you go back and find out that, surprise, the pieces to the plot line that you thought you laid out all wonderfully around the room are actually scattered. Some are flipped upside down. Some aren't even for this puzzle. You just took that from another book and put it in there. But in your mind, it's like, oh, yeah, no, I remember, they saved the princess, right? No, male common child. Like, it's funny how things change.
Yep. So
focusing a bit more on the physical description, they're about 9 feet tall, weigh somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 pounds, which, for the scientific side of us all, that makes them about 2 drow in height and approximately 3 to 4 drow in weight. If we were to replace the standard system of weights with measuring with drow. They have a head like a vulture, a neck of crested feathers, and the body of a beetle. A mottled gray chitinous exoskeleton that is extremely thick and dense and covered in sharp studs. Evidently, the exoskeleton could be removed and transferred into a tough armor. Now, I'm imagining that this means you could use it as an armor. Not that the Hookar is going to remove it like a hermit crab.
That would make sense.
Right. Well, it would seem a bit redundant that he took off his own armor to use his armor.
Oh, he's got to go to bed, and he can't sleep in his armor.
Somehow it'd be a little bit more of a horrifying picture to see like this pale like Hookar butt just wiggling around as they take their exoskeleton off, use it as a shield. They're just mooning the whole Underdark. No shame.
Oh man,
I did find it a bit strange. It says that they are especially susceptible to diseases and parasites.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they evidently have a life expectancy of less than 40 years. They do molt, so this might also give rise to how they can use armor. So you can come across Hookar or moltings, maybe to use as shells to use as shields. So they molt. Their shell will slough off, and a new pliable one will replace it and slowly harden into its upgraded skeleton. Okay. For that time, they are extremely vulnerable because it is it's not hardened armor.
Right, of course.
When it comes to their senses, they do see. So you could use darkness, but they don't see very well at all. So their hearing is extremely acute, as well as a keen sense of smell. So they use echolocation, much like a bat. So comparison is they can see just like Mr. Magoo. They can't see very well. That's what the clicking does. Is it echo vibrates and lets them know. That's terrifying. Yeah, right. That allows them to see nearby objects without the need of light, to which they're sensitive to as well. Kind of a theme of the Underdark, right? Because there's no light except for the Narbindel, glowing lights, heat. When it comes to reproduction, just to make sure we cover the biology class portion of the creature feature, they lay eggs.
Makes sense. That follows. Bird-like, crab-like, they lay eggs. Perfect.
The eggs are about 3 inches and look like rocks. So the Hookars will actually camouflage them in the cavern by strewing them about with the rocks. Hookars prefer to ambush from above. Ambush their prey from above. They would work together as a group. So, like we saw, there was 5 of them in the cavern. They're going to do that like flock creatures. And if necessary, they're going to use their ability to climb up to retreat up a wall for better technical advantage, maybe just safety. They're going to slither back on up that wall. They live in families of no more than a dozen. They're always led by the eldest male. So a little bit of patriarchy inside of the Hookars. They sleep about half the time. And ironically, they move quite lethargically when they aren't being threatened. So kind of like a sloth. And if you think about it, this energy conservation means that they could survive on smaller amounts of food relative to the large size of their body.
I was about to say, when you got into like they sleep around half the time and they're lethargic and all this, I'm just like, man, maybe they're my spirit monster, and then they don't eat much.
Right?
Nah.
You're more of a lion, sir. Tell
No, don't go in. No.
I need the pride to go out and hunt for me and bring me tribute. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, I am on board with that. Yeah, I can do that.
The Hookars are omnivores. They prefer meat, but they will resort to fungi or lichen. Lichen's how you say that, right?
Yep, correct.
Well, moss on the rocks. Excellent.
Yep. Well, not
Rumors
moss, but yes.
The moss appearing stuff on the rocks.
There you go.
Us plebes who are not indoctrinated into better science.
Sorry.
No. I always never really knew because I always saw it as like the fuzz on a rock, and I was like, "Oh, it must be moss."
I guess it looks a little similar. It's technically a fungi and a bacteria colony, like in a symbiotic relationship. It's not one thing. It's like 2 things living together. Yeah,
that's excellent.
It's interesting.
I'm gonna have to Google that when I'm done. Rumors have it that the Hookars are quite fond of eating Drow. They have a gland in their abdomen which allows them to eat lots of foods that would be poisonous to humanoids, like shriekers we mentioned inside of the fight to House Tavir earlier, violet fungi, as well as zygomes. Hookars can also be found on Torolin, Orth, Oerth, something like that. They do have their own language, communicating in a series of clicks and clacks made with their exoskeleton, but they can all also speak Undercommon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that would be terrifying to hear a Hookar try to speak. I picture like Gollum, somehow worse.
Probably, yeah.
It's nice to meet you, Drow. No, I don't like it. Their communication is soft and gentle when speaking about things like friendship, but loud and frenzied when discussing food. So I automatically picture seagulls again, like mine. Totally. Suddenly, when food is involved, they're getting quite aggressive. Now, for the nuts and bolts of it all, we're going to take a look at the stat block for a Hookar in D&D 5e. I mentioned earlier that they're a large monstrosity. They are considered neutral alignment. Their armor class is 15, and their hit point is listed at 75. But if you want to roll it, it's 10d10 plus 20. Okay. So it could be well more than that. You could have a total of, 120 for health.
Right.
They can move or climb at the speed of 30 feet. Their excellent senses, besides sight, give them a skill bonus to perception plus 3. They have blind sight up to 60 feet, dark vision up to 120 feet, and a passive perception of 13. They do get an advantage on wisdom checks that rely on hearing. And if they're not deafened, if they are deafened, they can't use their echolocation. So you can't blind them in the way that you would have darkness. But if you're able to summon a deafening spell or deafen them, that would be their version of being caught in a globe of darkness. They wouldn't be able to see. That's how you would blind them.
Okay.
In terms of how they attack, their actions are multi-attack, which allows them to make 2 attacks and hook. Hook is it's a melee weapon attack. So I imagine essentially what they're doing is attacking twice with hook. Okay. It gets plus. That would make sense, right? Because they're not carrying weapons; they are weapons.
Right?
How would you carry that in that weird little clip thing? It wouldn't work. Although, if you go look, you'll find the YouTube video of the crab with a knife. So maybe. But for the hook, it gets plus 6 to hit, a reach of 10 feet.
Ooh.
Damn, it means like you don't have to be in most combat. For those of you who don't know, melee combat's going to be 5 feet, right? Mm-hmm. So you're in the square right next to them, and you're attacking. So you have to have a square that touches. What they're saying here is that a Hookar can be separated from you by a square and literally reach out across it and snatch you. That's freaky.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a damage. The damage roll is 2d6 plus 4 piercing damage.
Okay.
So it doesn't sound that bad right away, but depending on the level of the party that comes across the Hookar, it can get sticky.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because they normally
Well,
they hunt in packs.
Yeah, and
But
especially if it's multi-attack, like it's doing that 2 times, you know? So if it
yep,
hits you 2 times in a row, that's that would
yep.
do quite a bit.
Well, that's where it gets sticky, right? Because with the hunting in packs, you're probably gonna when you see one, you're probably gonna find a few more dropping into the party,
Yep.
and anything that allows that multi-attack can overwhelm pretty quickly if it hits.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about is a max damage of 16, right? So it doesn't sound bad. You're gonna roll a character, you're level 5, maybe you're somewhere in the neighborhood of I don't know 55, just
Right.
throwing a number out there. 55 health, you're a pretty strong guy running around with a nice constitution. Take 16 hit, you're still well above half, except it's multi-attack. So
Yep.
you could take 32 damage from one creature. And then there's 5 of them that suddenly show up in the party.
Yep.
So now you're looking at a total of 160 damage being done in one turn. That goes from that's not bad to are real bad.
Well, and that's like one of the struggles of being a good DM is like you want to challenge your group. You want to challenge your players, but at the same time, you don't want to I mean, I'm not looking to kill the I'm not looking to do a total party kill, you know, and
TPK.
you know, not all the time. Every once in a while, you guys annoy me to the point where I'm just like, just Tarask.
Well, no, and you know it's tough. I would imagine one of the toughest parts is trying to build out as a DM. What's going to happen? Because if you have a party of 5 hook horrors and everybody comes out, you could get 160 damage in that one round.
Yeah.
Or
none.
Because they may not hit.
Right.
They may roll poorly,
Which happens so often, and it's so frustrating.
and so like there you are trying to plan it out, and it's like man, so you know hook horrors can seem daunting. Or if you put it up to max damage, which again realistically will not happen,
Right.
it could be savage though when it does.
Yep.
And then when you didn't try to TPK, you can put the entire party's pelt on the wall behind you because 32 on a double would put a low-level adventurer in harm's way real quick.
Oh, yeah.
You know, definitely a good reason to be wary of the Underdark. Justin, what's your
Awesome.
dungeon delve, bud?
Cool, thank you. My dungeon delve this week is Rage. A couple times Rage was discussed in
I feel like when you say rage, you got to give it a little bit of emphasis in the
Rage! A couple times throughout this chapter, there was a reference to how Drizzt was feeling during the encounter with the Hookars, which he was feeling. He was filled with rage. He was filled with rage right after the child was killed. And even before that, when the child was screaming, his eyes became filled with rage. And then the child was killed. He was filled with rage again.
I love this insight that you're doing because I would have never thought of this. But because again, you know, I know playing
Right.
rage isn't normally a Drow thing, but when
Yeah.
when you read it, he's using rage. He
Right.
absolutely is using rage.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So, I mean, I don't think of... I mean, rage is a feature that barbarians use in 5e. Perhaps they were used in other classes as well, or in earlier versions, but I don't really see Drizzt as a barbarian, but either way, he tapped into his inner barbarian and he used rage. So rage is described in the player's handbook as fighting with your primal ferocity.
That's excellent.
Yeah. On your turn, you can enter a rage as a bonus action, and as long as you aren't wearing armor, like most barbarians don't wear armor, then you get the following bonus effects. You get advantage on your strength checks and saving throws. So again, that means that you roll 2 dice and you choose the higher one when you're doing a strength check or a strength saving throw. You can, or when you make a rage attack, you add rage damage to the damage. I didn't realize that. So if you make an attack while you are raging, and you manage to hit the creature, or hit your target, you actually get to add more damage than just the normal roll. So,
You know, that makes a ton of sense when you say it that way, because if I'm swinging a hammer and I swing it hard, it does damage. If
Right.
I like swing my shoulder, wow, there's so many S's. If I swing my shoulder out of socket, it's going to do even more damage.
right. Yeah. So I didn't realize that was a thing, even though our current party plays with a barbarian. I didn't know that. I mean, I assume that Rock is doing that.
Say shout out, Rock. Hope you're doing well, buddy.
So, yeah, like if you're level 1, then you add 2 damage to your hit if you're raging. If you're up to at level Yeah, at level 9, you start to add 3 damage to your hit, and at level 16, you start adding 4 damage to your hit. Now, honestly, like, at level 16, you're probably doing a lot more damage than, I mean, well, maybe
It
not.
doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that, like, if you're using a D6 die for damage, then you get a max of 6. But what you said earlier with the hook
Right.
horrors, you might get none. This is a
True.
guaranteed hit plus every time. No, not
Well,
guaranteed hit. This is a guaranteed
plus 4 damage.
add-on of a
Yeah.
fixed
Yep.
die.
Yeah.
One-sided, two-sided, 4 damage at the top every time.
Right. So there's those traits that you get, but then you also, probably the most famous or my favorite effect that raging gives you is you become resistant to non-magical damage. So bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, you become resistant to it, which means that whatever you are hit with, you take half. And you in D&D, in 5e at least, you always round down. So if you take 10 damage, you take 5 instead. If you take 11 damage, half of 11 is 5.5. You round down, so now it's 5. It's you always round down. And yeah, with bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, you take half damage. Like, that's where barbarians start to make such good tanks. Even though they're not wearing armor, they're if they utilize this ability well, they can absorb so much damage. So they just like run up into the front and just start taking all the damage and let all the casters and ranged people just start bombarding from a distance.
What if you made a barbarian who is proficient with plate armor, right? I mean, maybe he doesn't attack very well, but he rages out. He sits in his giant suit of armor. Would they ever be able to do damage?
No, and that's the thing. Like, barbarians are known for not using armor. So
no, I get that, but then you get one who's like, you know what? I'm hideous. I feel very self-conscious about myself. I have to cover myself in giant metal plates.
It's not saying that they can't wear clothes, but
Right.
but yeah. One of the things that you need to make sure that you're not doing is wearing armor, because that's with rage you're not allowed to wear armor.
Oh, see, that's neat.
Yeah.
There's little fine details inside of it. I like that.
So barbarians, I didn't make a note of it, but it said that their armor class is their dex modifier. It's like 10 plus their dex modifier plus, I want to say, their con modifier. Like, they get to add 2 modifiers to their AC.
Wow.
From what I remember. So that's like, not only do they get rage so that they are able to minimize their amount of non-magical damage, but they also have a generally higher AC for not being armored. So it gives them an incentive to not take on armor.
And I mean, it's not going to max the skill at like level 20 for the most part, because you're adding 2.
Right.
But like, if you had it as strength, it would be OP, because you're going to use strength as your number one slot skill every top roll for a barbarian.
Yep.
But Dex and Con are going to be 2 and 3.
Yep. Yeah.
However you want to set it, Dex and Con are almost always going to be 2 and 3, I would think, because you need a lot of health as a barb, and you need to be nimble to be able to strike and do damage with that strength.
Because I mean,
they're really like, they know they've forced you to put, like, right up in here, right, my YouTube thing, blam, right there, stick that up there, and that's going to be number 1. That's strength every time. And it's almost like, since they know they hobbled you on purpose, well, you know what, we'll let you add 2 and 3 though.
Yeah. So there are a couple negative things associated with the rage ability, though. One, they're not able to cast spells. I mean, like, if you were able to cast spells while you are raging, you cannot cast spells, or else you come out of rage. Rage also ends after 1 minute, which is 10 turns in an encounter, or it ends after you fall unconscious, or if you do not. This one's interesting. If you do not attack a creature or take damage within a round. Okay, so perhaps so you could theoretically use your action to prepare an action, to prepare an attack, and say, if that creature gets close to me, then I'm going to attack it. And if you're raging and you prepare this attack, but it doesn't get triggered and you don't take damage, then bye-bye rage. Like, you lost it. That's interesting. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, when you were saying it earlier, it makes me think, because you were like, oh, you can't cast a spell or it ends. It's like, well, that's because, you're right. You would have to focus to cast a spell. And focusing is like anathema to Rage.
Yeah, it's
And then
the opposite.
unconscious, you lose it. And if you're unconscious, you can't be mad. How are you
Right.
going to walk around and kick indoors if you're mad? Doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yep.
And then if you don't do damage or attack, that one was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because again, yes, right. You're in rage. You want to go flip tables. You want to go rah, right? You want to let
Yep.
it all out. But
Yeah.
if you don't have a target to Hulk smash, your rage dissipates because you're
Yeah.
like, I'm mad. I'm mad. Nothing to do.
I'm moderately angry.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'll take a nap. I'm out.
Cool. All right. Well, that is my Dungeon Delve. I think that's going to mark the end of our 14th episode here, Jeffrey. So thank you all for listening. Remember that if you like the show, give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure that you're getting the most out of this podcast. Make sure you're reading along with us.
If you have not picked up a copy of the book yet, I'm actually feeling like maybe it's starting to get a bit personal, right? I mean, did you get a paper cut that never quite healed? Did a small mite of dust fly up and give you an eye infection? Look, if reading books has brought persistent pain and trauma to your life, I've got the answer right here. Pick up the audiobook. Listen to it wherever you do your listening. Maybe your job's really boring and you'd like a little entertainment. And maybe you had a long ride. You wanted some company during the commute. Me and Justin, here we are in your ear. You could listen to the accompanied book as well. Or, you know what? Maybe you're a hook horror. You got problems turning pages because you don't have fingers and your vision is too poor to read. So, you know what? Use your keen sense of hearing and listen to chapter 14. Then shoot us an email, drizztdoneright@gmail.com, or log on to our Discord and join in on the discussion. Remember, where are we going to find that invitation? It's in the episode description. Join the invitation. Join the Dim Light Squad. We would love to hear from you.
We would absolutely love to hear from you. So make sure you send those emails, get on that Discord. It's been a blast. Now it's time to say goodbye.
Man, it's amazing. We've almost made it to the halfway point. And I got to say, guys, me and Justin are so impressed with how the audience and the community have continued to grow and evolve. Hopefully, you all enjoy what we're putting together for you. There's a link in the episode description at the end. It allows you to reach out and donate to the show. If you want to show a little love, you can take that dollar up, wad it up, and throw it at us through the internet. Everything that comes in through the links going 100% towards improving the show, like green screens, lighting, improved equipment, like we were just talking about. The podcast, can't remember the switchboard in order to bring
the soundboard.
That's the soundboard to bring more sounds and liveliness to the things as we go through. That's exactly what we're talking about when it comes to equipment. You can give a little, you can give a lot, you can give nothing at all, and we still appreciate each and every one of you.
Absolutely.
Until we meet again in the next chapter of our journey, farewell, play fair, be well.